Okay, so the title of this video is going to be Man-Eating Super Snake, as really kind of a, not to poke fun at really anyone, but there is some concern. So these are both species of python that are invasive to South Florida. On my left, we have a North African rock python, and on my left, or on my right, is a Burmese python. And so these Burmese pythons were from a female that was collected, that was gravid down in South Florida, laid eggs. I incubated the eggs and hatched out these neonates to make available for fellow researchers. So I'm not going to actually handle any of these guys at the same time just because I am trying to keep them more or less isolated. But I figure a side-by-side video comparison between the two would be interesting. So as you can see right off the bat, for some reason, people seem to have trouble making the distinction between these two species, when in actuality, you can see they're really kind of markedly quite different from each other. The least of which being, like, aside from the overall pattern, just look at how thick the head stripe is on the Burmese python and how the kind of a little brighter tones and more kind of a blocky pattern compared to the African rocks. And the African rocks seem to have a little bit more kind of variation in there. So aside from just overall differences in terms of like just visual characteristics, I've noticed that the African rock pythons have historically been known to have a really kind of bad personality, where they can be a little pretty hyper aggressive. What's funny is that I've not had that experience, at least for this age class. You can hear these Burmese pythons hissing and being upset and stuff like that, whereas African rocks are just kind of figuring out what's going on. So what's interesting is that I find that the baby Burmese pythons are a lot more willing to strike out and flail and, just be a general kind of party pooper. Whereas the African rocks as a whole tend to be kind of a little calmer during the interaction, but when they do decide that they're done, they hit their target like very accurately. Whereas the Burmese pythons are kind of like just bite anything, ask questions later. The African rocks, when they decide they're going to bite, they're going to hit their target. I've also found that the strike range of the African rock python is like shockingly different than the strike range of the Burmese python. They can get almost twice as much of a strike out of a coil than the Burmese pythons seem to be able to. So, yeah, they can definitely be. Their movement as a whole is just a little bit different. So the initial concern with having both of these as invasive species in South Florida, and I should say that the Burmese pythons are well established, have a very wide range throughout the south of the state. The African rocks seem to be limited in a pretty small area. There has been evidence of them breeding there, but really not. They don't really seem to be as aggressive as a problem of the Burmese pythons. But there was some initial concern that the two might be able to hybridize with each other, which is a thing that's been done in captivity. The hybrids themselves have no characteristics really that are markedly different than either of the parent species. Both parent species kind of occupy the same general habitat types in their native habitat, which is kind of a mixed forest grassland type thing, which has put them as a really fairly well adapted species for South Florida, as not a dissimilar habitat type. So, but the hybrids of the two are really kind of unlikely to be anything any different of a beast than either parent species. So anyway, I just thought this would be a helpful video because you don't. So the North African rock pythons are starting to become very seldom seen in captive collections. So the opportunity to have them side by side is one that is not really readily available. So, at any rate,